During this period, a lady named Suzanne DePass was having a great effect on our lives. She worked for Motown, and it was she who trained us religiously once we moved to L.A. She also became a manager for the Jackson 5. We lived with her occasionally, ate with her, and even played with her. We were a rowdy, high-spirited bunch, and she was young herself and full of fun. She really contributed a lot toward the shaping of the Jackson 5, and I'll never be able to thank her enough for all she did. I remember Suzanne showing us these charcoal sketches of the five of us. In each sketch we had a different hairstyle. In another set of color drawings we were all pictured in different clothes that could be switched around like color forms. After we all decided on the hairstyles, they took us to a barber so he could make us match up with our pictures. Then, after she showed us the clothes, we went down to a wardrobe department where they gave us outfits to try on. They'd see us in one set of clothes, decide the clothes weren't right, and we'd all go back to the color forms to try on some more. We had classes in manners and grammar. They gave us a list of questions, and they said they were the kinds of questions that we could expect people to ask us. We were always being asked about our interests in our hometown and how we liked singing together. Fans and reporters alike wanted to know how old we each were when we started performing. It was hard to have your life turn into public property, even if you appreciated that people were interested in you because of your music. The Motown people tested us on the answers to questions we hadn't heard from anyone yet. They tested us on grammar and table manners. When we were ready, they brought us in for the last alterations on our sleeves and the trimming of our new afros. After all that, there was a new song to learn called I Want You Back. The song had a story behind it that we found out about little by little. It was written by someone from Chicago named Freddie Perrin. He had been Jerry Butler's pianist when we opened for Jerry in a Chicago nightclub. He had felt sorry for these little kids the club owner had hired, figuring the club couldn't afford to get anyone else. His opinion changed dramatically when he saw us perform. As it turned out, I Want You Back was originally called I Want to Be Free and was written for Gladys Knight. Freddie had even thought that Barry might go over Gladys's head and give the song to the Supremes. Instead, he mentioned to Jerry that he'd just signed this group of kids from Gary, Indiana. Freddie put two and two together, realized it was us, and decided to trust fate. When we were learning the Steeltown songs back in Gary, Tito and Jermaine had to pay special attention because they were responsible for playing on those records. When they heard the demo for I Want You Back, they listened to the guitar and bass parts, but Dad explained that Motown didn't expect them to play on our records. The rhythm track would be taken care of before we put our vocals down. But he reminded them that this would put more pressure on them to keep up their practice independently because we'd have to duplicate those songs in front of our fans. In the meantime, all of us had lyrics and cues to learn. The guys looking after us in the singing department were Freddie Perrin and Bobby Taylor and Deke Richards, who, along with Hal Davis and another Motown guy named Phonce Mizell, were part of the team that wrote and produced our first singles. Together, these guys were called the Corporation. We went over to Richards' apartment to rehearse, and he was impressed that we had prepared so well. He didn't have to do much tinkering with the vocal arrangement he'd worked out, and he thought that while we were still hot, we should go right to the studio and cut our parts. The following afternoon, we went to the studio. We were all so happy with what we got that we took our rough mix over to Berry Gordy. It was still mid-afternoon when we arrived at his studio. We figured that once Berry heard it, we'd be home in time for supper. But it was 1 in the morning when I finally slumped in the back seat of Richard's car, bobbing and steadying my head all the way home to fight off sleep. Gordy hadn't liked the song we did. We went over every part again, and when we did, Gordy figured out what changes he had to make in the arrangement. He was trying new things with us, like a school chorus master who has everyone singing their part as if they're singing alone, even if you can't hear him or her distinctly for the crowd. After he was through rehearsing us as a group and he had reworked the music, he took me aside one-on-one to explain my part. He told me exactly what he wanted and how he wanted me to help him get it. Then he explained everything to Freddie Perrin, who was going to record it. Barry was brilliant in this area. Right after the single was released, we went in to cut an album. We were particularly impressed with the I Want You Back session then, because that one song took more time and tape than all the other songs on the record combined. That's the way Motown did things in those days because Barry insisted on perfection and attention to detail. I'll never forget his persistence. This was his genius. Then and later, I observed every moment of the sessions where Barry was present and never forgot what I learned. To this day, I use the same principles. Barry was my teacher and a great one. He could identify the little elements that would make a song great rather than just good. It was like magic, as if Barry was sprinkling pixie dust over everything. For me and my brothers, recording for Motown was an exciting experience. Our team of writers shaped our music by being with us as we recorded it over and over, molding and sculpting a song until it was just perfect. We would cut a track over and over for weeks until we got it just as they wanted it. And I could see while they were doing it that it was getting better and better. They would change words, arrangements, rhythms, everything. Barry gave them the freedom to work this way because of his own perfectionist nature. I guess if they hadn't been doing it, he would have. Barry had such a knack. He'd just walk into the room where we were working and tell me what to do, and he'd be right. It was amazing. When I Want You Back was released in November 1969, it sold 2 million copies in 6 weeks and went to #1. Our next single, ABC, came out in March 1970 and sold 2 million records in 3 weeks. I still like the part where I say, "Sit down, girl. I think I love you. No, get up, girl. Show me what you can do." When our third single, The Love You Save, went to #1 in June of 1970, Barry's promise came true. When our next single, I'll Be There, was also a big hit in the fall of that year, we realized we might even surpass Barry's expectations and be able to pay him back for all the effort he had made for us. My brothers and I, our whole family, were very proud. We had created a new sound for a new decade. It was the first time in recording history that a bunch of kids had made so many hit records. The Jackson 5 had never had much competition from kids our own age. In the amateur days, there was a kids group called the 5 Stair Steps that we used to see. They were good, but they didn't seem to have the strong family unit that we did, and sadly, they broke up. After ABC hit the charts in such a big way, we started seeing other groups that record companies were grooming to ride the bandwagon we had built. I enjoyed all these groups, the Partridge Family, the Osmonds, the DeFranco Family. The Osmonds were already around, but they were doing a much different style of music, like barbershop harmony and crooning. As soon as we hit, they and the other groups got into soul real fast. We didn't mind. Competition, as we know, was healthy. Our own relatives thought one bad apple was us. I remember being so little that they had a special apple crate for me to stand on with my name on it so I could reach the microphone. Microphones didn't go down far enough for kids my age. So many of my childhood years went by that way, with me standing on that apple box singing my heart out while other kids were outside playing. As I said before, in those early days, the corporation at Motown produced and shaped all our music. I remember lots of times when I felt the song should be sung one way and the producers felt it should be sung another way. But for a long time, I was very obedient and wouldn't say anything about it. Finally, it reached a point where I got fed up with being told exactly how to sing. This was in 1972 when I was 14 years old, around the time of the song Lookin' Through the Windows. They wanted me to sing a certain way, and I knew they were wrong. No matter what age you are, if you have it and you know it, then people should listen to you. I was furious with our producers and very upset. So I called Berry Gordy and complained. I said that they had always told me how to sing, and I had agreed all this time, but now they were getting too mechanical. So he came into the studio and told them to let me do what I wanted to do. I think he told them to let me be more free or something. And after that, I started adding a lot of vocal twists that they really ended up loving. I do a lot of ad-libbing, like twisting words or adding some edge to them. When Barry was in the studio with us, he would always add something that was right. He'd go from studio to studio, checking on different aspects of people's work, often adding elements that made the records better. Walt Disney used to do the same thing. He'd go check on his various artists and say, well, this character should be more outgoing. I always knew when Barry was enjoying something I was doing in the studio because he has this habit of rolling his tongue in his cheek when he's pleased by something. If things were really going well, he'd punch the air like the ex-professional boxer he is. My three favorite songs from those days are Never Can Say Goodbye, I'll Be There, and ABC. I'll never forget the first time I heard ABC. I thought it was so good. I remember feeling this eagerness to sing that song, to get in the studio and really make it work for us. We were still rehearsing daily and working hard. Some things didn't change, but we were grateful to be where we were. There were so many people pulling for us, and we were so determined ourselves that it seemed anything could happen. Once I Want You Back came out, everyone at Motown prepared us for success. Diana loved it and presented us at a big-name Hollywood discotheque where she had us playing in a comfortable party atmosphere like at Barry's. Following directly on the heels of Diana's event came an invitation to play at the Miss Black America telecast. Being on the show would enable us to give people a preview of our record and our show. After we got the invitation, my brothers and I remembered our disappointment at not getting to go to New York to do our first TV show because Motown had called. Now we were going to do our first TV show, and we were with Motown. Life was very good. Diana, of course, put the cherry on top. She was going to host the Hollywood Palace and big Saturday night show. It would be her last appearance with the Supremes and the first major exposure for us. This meant a lot to Motown because by then they had decided that our new album would be called Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. Never before had a superstar like Diana passed the torch to a bunch of kids. Motown, Diana, and 5 kids from Gary, Indiana were all pretty excited. By then, I Want You Back had come out, and Barry was proven right again. All the stations that played Sly and the Beatles were playing us too.